morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all to University Express, Erie County Senior Services free lifelong learning program for older adults. Thank you for being here today. Senior Services' mission is to connect older adults with local resources that meet their unique needs. They offer so many great programs and services. There's truly something for everyone. The number you can call for more information is 858-8526. Welcome to those people that are streaming at home. University Express now uses a key tag sign-in process. So if you don't have a key tag, we do have an application that you can sign up for. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, Joe Fiegl. Right, is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Joe Fiegl is teaching today's class on what happens after you flush, right? He's the Deputy Commissioner for Erie County's Division of Sewage Management, which is responsible for the 7 Erie County sewer districts. Prior to joining Erie County, Joe worked as an engineer consultant. He is a licensed professional engineer in New York State, a board-certified environmental engineer, and a graduate of Northwestern University. So thank you for being here today, and we look forward to it.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it. And again, thank you for coming. As Don mentioned, I'm Joe Fiegl. Just free kill, hey Joe, I got a question or whatever it is, we're going through it. Don't mind it. Actually, I think it leads to a more interactive discussion. So, as I said, we're going to go over what happens after you flush. Hopefully this presentation brings a smile to your face.
Good work.
So, I turned the toilet into a smiley face. I don't know if you can see that. So as I take you through the wonderful world of sewers. Okay. I'll start off with a question for you. What do you think when I say what or who is a polluter? Raise your hand if you have any ideas.
Toxic dump.
No, that's okay. Toxic dump. Okay. Yes.
I'm a polluter.
You're a polluter. Okay. Anyone else has some answers?
Throwing stuff down the drain that you shouldn't be throwing down.
You're throwing things down the drain you shouldn't.
Throwing stuff in water, bottles or whatever.
Yep. Okay. All great answers. All right. The next question I have. What comes to mind when you think of sewers?
Yuck.
Yuck. All right. I like the honesty. Actually, that's what I want. I wanted
Dirty.
dirty,
Smelly.
smelly, disgusting.
You want them to work.
What's that?
You want them to work.
You want them to work. Yes, absolutely. That's my job. So we'll get back to these questions a little bit later as we get through the presentation. I don't know why this is not advanced. Sorry, everyone. Just technical difficulties. Okay. There we go. All right, perfect. All right. So the title of this presentation is what happens after you flush. So I'd be remiss if I didn't go through the wonderful world of home plumbing. When I give this presentation at schools, this is usually where I say that we have a little bit of potty talk. So we have 2 different systems coming into our home. We have our potable water system, which feeds your faucets, your sinks, your tubs, your dishwashers, your washing machines, things like that. That's the clean water, typically coming from either like the Erie County Water Authority or whoever is the local water service provider. We then have what is referred to as the drain pipes. And those are the pipes that we see in black on this figure below. That's where the drain for your tub, for your toilet, sink, the discharge on your dishwasher or your wash machine, that's where those pipes all come together. And you probably, if you ever opened up underneath your sink and seen that little P-trap, that little curved trap, that's part of the drain system. So all those drains come together. If you happen to have a basement in your home, they come together into a large pipe, and then that larger pipe exits your home.
How does it exit?
I
Just
will-
like,
I'll show you. So it comes on down, and it flows by gravity. And what I mean by gravity is if you take this table and you put a marble on it, and it's flat, it's just going to stay in that one place, right? If you tilt it just slightly up, it starts rolling down the table, right? In a similar way, we have our pipes. They're sloped slightly downward, and what that does then, it allows the flow to go by gravity. So that's what we talk about, gravity flow. So you have your indoor plumbing, and that comes down, and then it goes into what's referred to either your house or your sewer lateral. So those smaller pipes come into a slightly larger pipe. It's usually about 4 or 6 inches in diameter.
what about the thing that goes around, that's for rain that comes in?
Yeah. So there's 2 separate systems. You have your sanitary system, and then you have your storm system. The storm is not, they're actually not meant to be connected, except actually in the city of Buffalo, because they have a
I
combined
don't want to
system.
jump ahead of you.
No, that's okay. So this is just for the sanitary. So then that private lateral then connects to, if in this area, it's going to be a public sewer system. In some of the rural areas, they might have like a septic tank or something like that. The lateral in most municipalities is not owned by the public, so Erie County doesn't own those laterals, and the reason being is because it doesn't serve the public, it only services one building. So folks often think that it's part of the sewer system. It's actually just because it only serves one property, it's a private asset. So it's one of those things where, have you ever thought about your lateral coming out of your home?
That's the pipe that comes from your house to the curb, is it?
To the sewer in the street or in the sidewalk,
That's-
wherever it's
It's
located.
owned by the homeowner.
That's owned by the homeowner. So if you have a problem, like oftentimes, like we always encourage folks to call, if you're in a county sewer district, to call the county, because there may be a problem in our system, but it might be times where it actually is a problem in your private lateral, and then you'll have to call a plumber to either snake it out or do something like that. So this shows. Yeah, this isn't working. I'm not going to worry about it.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. So that black line is essentially what the private lateral is doing. So that's in today's world, but I want to take us back, oh gosh, probably like 170 years, 1854 in London. There was an infamous cholera epidemic that had gone throughout the entire city. It smelled terribly, and folks thought that it was airborne disease that was making people sick. It wasn't until Dr. John Snow had meticulously went through the different records and mapped where people were getting sick, and then looked into where they were actually getting their drinking water from, that they figured out that it was actually their water that was making them sick, not the air and the stench that was going on around them. And so this is a picture of the Broad Street pump in London that's still true today. He famously took the handle off the pump, and then people stopped drinking it, and then cholera stopped spreading in this particular neighborhood. So it was all these different mapping techniques and everything that Dr. John Snow had done that really led to actually the first study of epidemiology. Talked a lot about epidemiology with COVID-19 and things like that. This really kind of started here, which is collecting data to kind of figure out health characteristics in an area. So this is where people started to kind of figure out that, hey, the water that we're drinking, can make us sick if it's contaminated. But it wasn't just isolated in London. This is statistics from 1852 in the city of Buffalo. and these were various causes of death in September of 1852. So I got some statistics here. So at the time, City of Buffalo only had roughly about 70 or 75,000 people. In a 1 month time, 520 of the 707 deaths in the City of Buffalo were due to cholera
1952?
in 1852. So that 520 deaths equates to approximately 0.7% of the population. So in today's number, that would be 6,400 people dying in our area during a single month from a single disease. 6,400 people. So to kind of put this into context with COVID, and I'm not trying to minimize what happened during COVID, but just put some context to it. In the 2 years, in Erie County lost on average about 0.012% of its population. Comparing that to 1852 and the cholera epidemic, that would have been almost 154,000 people dying in Erie County alone. So, we had roughly about 2,700 deaths, which is tragic, absolutely tragic, right? 154,000 people would have died if the same thing happened with cholera back then. It just shows you how serious this was back in the mid-1800s. But getting back to the private lateral, with advances in understanding the disease in the 1800s, figuring out that actually was contaminated water from people's wastes that were causing the drinking water and making people sick, those wastes needed to be redirected away. So what folks said was, okay, well, let's instead of get them near where we're drawing our well water from, let's put it in the river, let's put it into the stream, get it away from us. And the common refrain was, dilution would be the solution to pollution. Let's get it out of there. So oftentimes in the early days of sewers, that's exactly what happened. All the home laterals connected to a pipe, which went to a larger pipe, and then they just put it into the creek, the river, or the stream. As long as it wasn't near one of the drinking water sources, actually it was semi-effective. People stopped getting as sick as they were because they weren't drawing contaminated water directly from a well that's right next to where they're just putting their wastes, and it was actually semi-functional. But by that solution of pollution dilution is a kind of a catchy rhyme, it only could go so far. So as populations started to grow, you could think that those wastes, while it may dilute in a certain concentration, as you have more and more people connecting in and putting it into the waterways, that creates its own problems. And it's to the point where, as the populations grew, that again we were having all sorts of problems, and waterborne disease was spouting up. To the point where, in the early 1900s, I think it was in Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls had the highest concentration, or the highest death toll for typhoid fever in the world. Think about it, that was last century. Like Niagara Falls, this wasn't a third world country. This was right down the river from us. And the principal cause pointed to was the city of Buffalo. The city of Buffalo at the time was a top 10 population city, and you had so much waste that was going into the Niagara River, and thinking it was going to be diluted, but meanwhile you were making people sick downstream in Niagara Falls. So actually, the United States government and the Canadian government got together and put together a international joint commission to address this, because they said, problems on the United States side is causing problems in Niagara Falls, Canada, and problems in Canada could cause problems in the United States. So we have these shared waters. We need to protect them. So this body is still here today, looking at different issues that happen with water quality in the Great Lakes region. And there's a lot of disputes. And could you blame people when you have right now, you have City of Buffalo is creating problems in Niagara Falls, Canada. So one of the main advancements that kind of came from that was to improve those shared waters was actually the formation of the Buffalo Sewer Authority. So this is from the Courier Express from 1939. Buffalo Sewer Authority, in the middle of the Great Depression, was created because it was seen as such a big problem. So even though there was really no money to go around, they were like, okay, this is something that is making people sick and could cause incredible problems. So the Sewer Authority was created basically to put together a big network of pipes to bring all those direct discharges into the Buffalo River, Skidjacker Creek, and all those other places, and bring them to the Bird Island treatment plant, which is right along the 190 on the Niagara River. And at the time, they constructed what was the largest chlorination system in the world. And this Courier Express article says, but Bird Island plant is steadily purifying Niagara River water. 1 year after that system was started, bacteria counts in Niagara River went down 97%. Yeah, pretty incredible.
How did they purify it then? What year is this?
So this was in 1939. Basically what they had a large settling tank that take some of the large solids out of there. They had some screenings to make sure that, some of the things that get flushed down wouldn't make it away. The settling tank, and then from there it was then chlorinated. So basically using bleach, yeah, like a swimming pool, whatever, just to keep the water, and then that's what killed the bacteria, and then it went to the river, and the bacteria were dead, and hence it did 97% decrease. And actually, if you flush a toilet here, that flow goes all the way to the Bird Island plant, so that system then get expanded out over the course of time.
Did they ever figure out, I don't know, this is just my silliness,
No.
if somebody were to, like, say, flush the toilet in Cheektowaga, how long before?
Yeah. So we talk about how engineers, like we love, like you can map out and see what the distance is, and estimate what the velocity is going through that sewer, and then you can do a calculation to determine how long it takes. So yes, people do that. In fact, sometimes so this is not, because that's not a county facility, I don't have all the intricacies, but when I'm doing this in like a county sewer district, I actually will bring that type of data, because it's a very common question. So talk about the public health issues. But dilution was not the solution to environmental pollution either. This was a photo from Time magazine in July of 1969, because the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland had lit on fire. Anyone remember that at all? Yeah, Beverly.
I do remember.
You remember that? Yeah. Think about that. Water is on fire. It defies logic, right? But at that time, industries were just taking, the oils, greases, whatever, and it was less expensive to just put it in the river as opposed to have to dispose of it properly. We found out some of those problems up in Love Canal, right, of what that could end up causing. Same thing here. So you had the Cuyahoga River lighting on fire. In fact, this was actually a picture from, so this was in Time magazine in 1969. This was a picture actually from a few years earlier. Cuyahoga River had lit on fire 12 times in like a decade. I mean, it's like incredible, right? But here's an interesting quote. So, Time magazine had said the Cuyahoga River was so saturated with sewage and industrial waste that it oozes rather than it flows. Again, this is a river. This is a water body, right? So the Cuyahoga River was not the only water body to catch on fire. Although less publicized, in 1968, the Buffalo River had lit on fire. And it wasn't some sort of brazen act of vandalism or anything like that. A worker was on a bridge rehabilitation project and had a torch, and a spark had come off of the torch and hit the water, and it started on fire.
Was that the Ohio grid?
It was either Ohio or Michigan. I'm not quite sure. It was one of the two. But think about that. Again, there's so much waste on the river that someone was just performing maintenance and it lit on fire. It was that same year that the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration described the Buffalo River as a a repulsive holding basin for industrial and municipal wastes that was devoid of oxygen and almost sterile. Essentially, you had no fish that could live in there whatsoever. That reputation started to become more publicized a few years earlier when President Johnson visited. So that's a picture of President Johnson in Buffalo. At that meeting, someone brought in a bucket of sediment from the bottom of the Buffalo River and stirred it with a big ladle. And Lady Bird Johnson recoiled at the smell of it. And LBJ basically said, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of it." Just because as soon as he had that smell, like, I can't let this happen anymore. That same year, Senator Bobby Kennedy, whose son is actually in the news quite a bit right now, he toured the Buffalo River and he was quoted as saying, "This is as bad as anything I've seen." Again, people talk about the Cuyahoga River. We had the Buffalo River right in our backyard that was in basically the same shape. And then Lake Erie. Buffalo River goes into Lake Erie. Poor Lake Erie. In the 1960s, several national publications declared Lake Erie dead due to toxic algal blooms that would not allow fish to survive. It was so bad that in 1971, Dr. Seuss, when he wrote the Lorax, of all things he could have chosen as environmental problem, he chose Lake Erie. So I'm sending them off with their futures so dreary, they walk on their fins and get woefully weary, in search of some water that isn't so smeary. I hear things are just as bad up in Lake Erie. So on that pleasant note, it's time for some Jeopardy. We'll see if I can keep Ken Jennings for host. Feel free to call out. I'm not going to have anyone have to force you to put your answer in the form of question. All right, let's see. The IT guy published first. How about we'll do water bodies for 200? Our local county is named after this water body. Lake Erie, that's right. All right, let's do 400. This water body is where the city of Buffalo and other portions of our area receive its drinking water from.
Sturgeon Pond.
So where's Sturgeon Point located? In what water body?
Lake Erie.
Lake Erie, that's right. All right, let's go 600. This water body was so important to business and commerce that major canals in the United States and Canada were connected to it.
Again, Lake Erie.
Lake Erie, that's right. Emmengold and Woodlawn Beach State Parks are located on this water body.
Lake Erie.
All right, I think we're starting to see a pattern, right? Lastly, Chris Hoover of Fishing League Worldwide stated this water body was the #1 smallmouth bass fishery destination in the United States.
Lake Erie.
Very good. I don't know who Chris Hoover is, but even if you don't know who Chris Hoover is, it's all Lake Erie, right? Our county's named after it. It's our drinking source. It's critical to commerce and economic development. It's used for beaches and recreation. It's a world-class fishery. It's amazing in the 1960s and before that we allowed this tremendous asset to deteriorate to such sad shape. So by the mid-1960s, with LBJ and momentum was really swinging to address these problems. The decisive action that LBJ had referred to was actually the passage of the Clean Water Act. And that happened right after LBJ had left office, and actually it was during Richard Nixon's time in 1972 it was passed. So quoting portions of the Clean Water Act directly, is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. And what came with that were regulations and funding. Those were the two things that ended up really leading to a lot of the positive changes. So the the Clean Water Act specifically noted that it would provide financial assistance to construct publicly owned treatment works, or POTWs. A more common term used for these facilities that were built or the existing facilities that are upgraded are wastewater treatment plants. So wastewater treatment plants are pollutant discharge elimination systems. So they eliminate pollutants. That's what they are. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or New York State DEC, issues permits to these facilities. So in these permits are limitations that the facility must meet. And basically DEC determines those limitations based upon what the water body is used for. So just one example. So on this list here, you can see that some of the things that are limitations are like pH. So you could imagine you don't want to have water that's going into like a river or stream that's too acidic. So they'll make sure that you have to have sampling and monitoring to make sure that the pH of the water is between 6 and 9. That's what typically is done there. Another term here called biochemical oxygen demand. So you can imagine if you have a water that you're discharging a water body that demands a lot of oxygen, basically means it needs a lot of oxygen to replenish itself. You're taking that oxygen out of the water body, and hence then the fish in the water life don't have that available to it. So there's limitations on that to make sure that it's protected. Phosphorus is a key item. Phosphorus is actually what led to a lot of those algal blooms that ended up causing a lot of the problems in Lake Erie. So actually, almost all the plants, wastewater treatment plants in our area, have a limitation on phosphorus to make sure that doesn't happen. Fecal chloroform. You can't have bacteria that are going to make people sick. So these are all things that DC determines to make sure that it's protective of the water body.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
You were just showing a picture of some big tanks, and you said wastewater treatment
Yes.
plants.
Yeah.
How many of those are there around the area? Or?
I want to say that in Erie County there are 24 wastewater treatment plants. Most of those are actually very, very small. There's probably about 10 that are very large, that service large areas.
And does this stuff go from there to yet another area? I mean, I don't understand.
Actually, we're gonna go through that.
go
So yeah.
Okay, because I live in Elma, so
Yeah. Okay.
I have, septic system.
Septic system.
But
Yep.
the guy comes in a truck and
Yep.
takes it all away. Does he go to one of those?
He'll go to one of those wastewater treatment plants and will offload the septic wastes into the treatment plant so that it can be cleaned up, and so it's not causing any sort of environmental problems.
Are they all on the water?
Almost all of them are. That's so. Again, you talk about how everything flows by gravity, right? So do our rivers and our streams. So our low points are often near waterways. So to make it economical, a lot of the facilities are built on water. So I mentioned the Bird Island treatment plant for Buffalo Sewer Authority, right on the Niagara River. If anyone's ever been to Woodlawn Beach State Park, right near Route 5 and 179 in Hamburg, directly south of there is the Southtown's treatment plant. Again, right on the waterway there, because everything kind of flows by gravity towards in the pipes, but towards that location. Great question. So, what does it take to eliminate that pollution? Well, in short, it's a step-by-step process. Each system's a little bit different. So we talked about some of those big tanks and stuff like that. I'm going to go through what's kind of a typical. As I said, each plant's a little bit unique. First, you got to know what you're actually treating, right? And so what's in sewage? Well, here's a partial list. Primarily, there's water. Most of it's water. And that's actually what we are recovering from that. So water is a finite resource. We were kind of talking a bit earlier. We have the same water that was around when the dinosaurs were around, right? It just kind of cycles through. It evaporates, precipitates. It's going through the oceans, and it goes in a huge cycle. So what we're doing is we're taking a pollutant and we're recovering a key resource out of it. We're providing clean water. Really incredibly important. It's the other stuff, the waste from people, detergents, toothpaste, dirt, toilet paper, bacteria, et cetera, those are the things that can potentially harm our waterways and what is removed or eliminated through the wastewater treatment plant process.
By volume, industrial byproducts would be higher.
So it depends on the area. So there are some places where, for example, in the city of Buffalo, you have some concentrations of a lot more industries and things like that. Here out in Cheektowaga, there's some industries, but mostly it's residential. So it depends. It depends on also if there is a specific industry that has a really high strength waste. Sometimes they'll actually have to do some pre-treatment before they can actually discharge because it may end up causing problems and stuff like that. All right, great question. Any other questions?
Does Cheektowaga have their own water sewer system?
The northern portions of Cheektowaga, the sewer system is owned by the town itself. The southern portion, actually, it's part of a county sewer district. And the reasons being, there's a lot of different reasons. If you go back into history, there used to be a lot of small underperforming treatment plants that were dotted throughout the landscape throughout our county. And when the Clean Water Act was passed, municipalities had to decide, do I upgrade this existing facility and run it into perpetuity, or do I eliminate it and see if I can send it to the Buffalo Sewer Authority? And so a lot of those small treatment plants that were run by the town, or maybe one was run by the county, were eliminated and went to the Buffalo Sewer Authority. But you still had all the sewers upstream in there, and those had to be managed too. And that's why the town owns a portion and the county owns a portion in the southern part.
Isn't the northern part Central Avenue?
I forget what the dividing line is for here. I have a map. I don't have it with me, unfortunately. It kind of shows where that dividing line is. So I'll see if I can, at the end of the presentation, I'll see if I can get that information.
Does it matter?
But if you're curious,
Just curious.
I'd love to answer the
I
question.
mean, the closer we are to the water filtration system doesn't mean we're getting better water.
That's right. No, that is true. So what happens after you flush? Well, first, that used water comes from those private laterals and is collected through a sewer system. In most municipalities, there are two types of sewer systems in the roads. We kind of talked about that. You have the storm system, which collects, runoff from the street, the roof gutters, and everything that goes along with that. And then you have your sanitary system. So you can see here, the lateral comes out, transitions into a sanitary sewer, and then the storm sewer is parallel to it. At least they should be disconnected.
I just thought they were together.
What's that?
They're not together,
In the city of Buffalo, they are, because that's the way the system was
right?
designed in the 1800s and 1900s. They've been actually working to disconnect portions of it. But out here, they are separate. So what I'm going to show you is actually some video footage from some televising work that we've done in sewer systems. Yes, we put cameras down sewers. In fact, this camera, probably we had to replace it today, is about $150,000. It's very expensive. It actually goes on like tank treads, about this long. You insert it in, and then you can pan. Well, I'll take you through some of the video so you can see it. So there's nothing special about this particular sewer. I just have to show it. So you can see here, this is one of those private laterals is connected into there. So what our camera operator is doing is just kind of observing to see if there's any sort of defects or anything like that. So you can see that's a break-in tap. It's active. We're going through here. This is a type of, it's called clay tile pipe. So it's an older material that's no longer used. It comes in 3-foot sections. So you can see there's some roots. Because you have 3-foot sections, you have a lot of joints. Where you have joints, you have potential where roots can come in, or you can have water coming in.
What do they use nowadays?
Primarily PVC, plastic pipe. You've probably seen it in about 13-foot sections, usually.
Is that the
green.
black ones, the big black ones?
No, they're usually a greenish color.
Okay.
There are other materials, but that's primarily what's used is plastic PVC. So you can see our camera operator sees there's a cap tap. Sometimes if it's not capped but it's inactive, that's a place where groundwater could come in. So we're going to want to cap that to make sure that that groundwater is not coming
So
in.
those holes that you're showing up on top is where the water's coming from?
So here is one that's active. So yes, that's one of those private laterals. So why this is useful is, you know, we have to make sure that we maintain these sewer systems into the future. And the only way you can get any sort of view of what's happening is by bringing that camera in and trying to determine if there's any sort of defects. Sometimes you'll see that there's cracks or like it's actually starting to collapse. You want to address that before it's a full collapse. And then we potentially could back up someone's basement or have some those type of problems. So, talked a lot about gravity flow, and although that's our goal, you know, there's times in which, you know, you get to a river, stream, or there's some sort of obstruction where you can't make it by gravity any longer. So what we do is we also have a series of pumping stations. Think about when you go to the gas station. You go to the gas pump, right? What you have is in the ground, you have a large tank that has all the gasoline in it. And then you have a mechanical device that takes that gasoline from a lower level and brings it up to a higher level, right? What we do with our pumping stations is we have a big tank in the ground that holds sewage in it. We have a series of pumps that are there. And then instead of a short distance from the tank to your car, we'll have it in a longer pipeline to take it to a high point, you know, say at the top of a hill or something like that. And then we'll have it go into another gravity sewer. Does that all kind of make sense? So the following is a photo of our Boston Valley pumping station. This is one down in Hamburg. Probably notice a small building, you know, an antenna, some yellow bollards, the paved area. Doesn't look like there's much going on there, right? So this is a picture from the construction of the facility just a few years ago. As you can see, there's people down there, right? It's an enormous hole. Basically, this was over 30 feet deep. I forget the diameter of that hole, but you can see it's pretty massive. This is what they were constructing here was the wet well. That's that tank in the ground that receives the sewage, right? Let me show it. I think I got another view of it. Okay, so this is what after that hole was filled in and they started to form the concrete walls. You can see there's 3 pumps that are down there at the bottom. Here's another view of the pumps themselves. Just to give you a kind of a sense of this, the peak flow from this pumping station is 4.6 million gallons per day, or roughly 3,200 gallons per minute. Kind of put that in perspective, this station could empty a limited-sized swimming pool in less than 3.5 hours. So it can really, that's a lot of sewage, right? Just a few other points. You know, I mentioned that antenna in the photo. We have to monitor this pumping station 24/7. So we actually have a radio telemetry that goes. We have, like for example, at our solar treatment plants, we have staff there around the clock. So if there's any sort of alarm, we have a pump fail or something like that, we get immediate notification and say, hey, we need to send some maintenance staff out there to be able to maintain it. This right here is a electrical generator. So the power goes out, we still need to be able to move sewage. Basically, we have to move sewage no matter what the conditions are. That's basically what our goal and what we have to do. So if there's any sort of malfunctions, we have a lot of contingencies, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D to try to make sure that happens. We installed 3 pumps in there. We only actually need 2 to convey the peak flows, but if we ever have a pump down, we can still make sure that we're maintaining service.
How big are those pumps?
That one's probably about this, like that. So really good size. I forget what the size of the pipe coming out of there, but it's a pretty good size. I think this project, all told, was about $3 million. That was a few years ago. I'm guessing with inflation, you know, you're probably talking $5 million by the time it's all said and done. That's one of 100 pumping stations that the county maintains throughout the entire area.
Where is it pumping the water from? The did all this sewage come in and it's
Yeah,
underneath?
so it flows by gravity into that wet well, that tank,
It's underneath
tank in the
it.
ground, it's under the ground. And then this happens to be, it's called the Boston Valley Pumping Station, so it's in a kind of a valley area. And then it pumps it up the hill into the village of Hamburg. That's where, because the village of Hamburg is at a higher elevation. And then it flows by gravity, actually, from the village of Hamburg all the way to our Southtown's treatment plant
Okay,
on
so
Lake
then the
Erie.
pumps are like sitting on top of this big bowl of water to pump it out.
In this particular instance, so you can have two different designs. You can have pumps that are actually physically right in the wet well, so in the sewage itself,
Okay,
or you can have a pipe coming out of the wall that goes into what's referred to as a dry well, where you have a pump that's like kind of protected out of the wastewater, which is a different design on the pump, and that is where the pump would rest. So that would also be down below.
did you ever get vandalism around there?
Oh yeah. I got some pictures. Actually, I think right after this slide, I have some pictures and stuff that people put down.
Yes, but you have cameras and stuff to look at all the,
So
look and see if there's vandals.
the problem is, and you know, so we have the county alone has 1,200 miles of sewer that we maintain. That's enough sewer to go from here down to Disney World. So it's a really long distance. So we have good eyes on some of our pumping stations and certainly at our treatment plants and things like that. But if someone pops a manhole cover and puts something down, we'll never see it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that can cause problems. And we have to address those.
The picture you showed of the, where is it in Hamburg? There's no electricity wires going into it, it's all underground.
No, there's so I
I didn't
believe.
see it.
Yeah. Let me see if I can.
To me, it looked like it was all underground, like just electrical.
I
I don't see no poles.
I'm pretty sure we had to put a new utility pole in here, but you're right, I don't see it. I'm not sure at that particular location. Sorry. So once the flows make it through the sanitary sewers and the pumping stations and they enter the treatment plant site, the first step is what's referred to as preliminary treatment. The preliminary treatment removes the large debris that come in up front to protect the equipment in the wastewater treatment plant. Hopefully this video works. Okay, so this is a type of screen called a bar screen. So essentially, what you have is metal bars that are going through this thing, and debris gets caught up on it, right? So the problem is if too much debris gets caught up on it, then you can see that the flow can't make its way through. So what you do, you essentially have a rake that comes through and scoops up that debris off of the, and you can see it here in the animation, scoops up that debris, moves it off, and then that goes off for further
Again, how
disposal.
big is that?
So depends on the treatment plant. So we're putting in new screens at our Southtown facility, the one that's right near Woodlawn Beach. They're like 27 feet long and about 5 feet wide, and we have 3 of them that we're putting in. So yeah, really, I mean, like this, and then like I said, you know, almost 3 stories tall. It's really huge equipment.
If those are just the wastewater, how does it show like bottles from bleach or water bottles, or how did that big stuff get in there?
Yeah, so people will pop manhole covers and just throw things down there because they think it's funny. But the problem is if you put something too big down there, it can clog the sewer.
Yeah.
And then we have to remove it. Now, meanwhile, you're potentially causing an overflow. You're potentially backing up people's basements. It's real trouble.
So you would send down that little robot, what's it called?
So sometimes, I'll give you an example. So, does anyone know what that is?
It's a ball, like a,
That's a bowling ball. We recovered a bowling ball from our sewer a couple of years ago. So we had a backup on a street, and we're trying to figure out what the heck's going on. So we sent our camera unit down there, and it looked like there was some sort of obstruction. So we have actually the equipment that's on a flusher truck. It's called a root cutter, which it goes like this, right? And it comes through and it cuts through. You kind of see there's a little bit of a indentation there, that's where the root cutter had caught it and moved it, and it moved it just enough, far enough down where we could recover it down at the other end of the manhole. We've had arborvitaes put down.
What was it?
Arborvitaes,
What's that?
like
Bushes.
those bushes, the trees. Propane cylinders people have put in there. Like I would find another hobby, but you know, whatever. Anyone see what that is there? It's a $100 bill.
Ah,
So one day our operators are going by, they're like, I don't believe this, a $100 bill. So they disinfected it, and then they bought pizza for the folks at the plant. I don't think anyone's going to be recovering that. Why someone would put a $100 bill down the drain, I have no clue.
I've heard that wipes have been.
Yes. So I will get into that. Remind me if I don't get to it because I have a picture of what can happen with the wipes. So after preliminary treatment, the next stage of the process is referred to as primary treatment. There are two main functions for primary treatment. First, you have the solids that settle to the bottom. So you have a lot of solids in sewage, right? But then you also have the oils, the greases, because, think about it, our skin is oily, right? You have little bits of oil that might be on your dishes after you wash them and things like that. Those are things that we don't want making their way into the water as well. So at the bottom, those settled solids are called sludge. And the oils and greases and fats that rose to the top are called scum. We got great terminology in wastewater, right? But that's what we do, is we try to separate those solids and those floatables out so then we can have clean water go on to the next step.
and you have different treatments to get these different.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an example of what's referred to as a clarifier. So actually, I think I have a picture. So you look at this and it's like, all right, it's kind of a tank in the ground. It doesn't look like much, right? But there's actually a lot of, let's talk about what engineers do. Like, there's a lot of design and thought process that goes into how these type of things function. So what ends up happening is you have wastewater that comes up, and then it comes up in the center, and then it flows towards the outside. So then what this allows the solids to settle to the bottom. You have the oils and greases that float to the top, and then you have the skimming equipment that brings those things together to try to separate them out from the cleaner water. I got a video a little bit later that kind of shows some of that. So before the Clean Water Act, we talked about with the Buffalo Sewer Authority. Basically, all it was you had that primary settling tank, and then you had disinfection, and that was it. But when the Clean Water Act was passed, that was really the advent of what's referred to as secondary treatment standards. So those are the additional steps that were brought forth to make sure that we're properly protecting the environment. I kind of talk about when we talk about wastewater treatment plant. What we do is we take what happens in nature and we speed it up. So if you think about it, like we have all sorts of animals in nature, and they're also going to the bathroom and creating waste. And what happens is you have microorganisms that break down those wastes over the course of time, and then you don't even know that they're there, and they're actually end up being fertilizer, and everything goes along with that. We can't do that with the high concentration we have from all the humans and stuff like that. We can't just put it out into the environment because we saw what happened back in the past. That's why we have treatment plants where we basically speed up that process. So let me just show. I have a couple examples here. So the following two videos are from a microscope using 1,000 times magnification. We actually have a laboratory we have a certified laboratory that can run all the different tests to make sure that our treatment plants are running properly. So this is raw sewage. So you can kind of see those little microorganisms. Again, this is at 1,000 times magnification. They're kind of swimming around in the sewage. Let me see, in the second video, this is a view of the activated sludge in the treatment process. You can see it's much more highly concentrated, bigger, things are kind of clumped together. What that does is that's basically taking what happens in nature and we're aerating it. We're bringing things together, bringing it into a higher concentration, and that's removing a lot of those wastes and everything else that happens in nature. We're having it speed up into this type of process. So we engineer those systems so that basically those microorganisms are doing the job, and we're just utilizing them to our benefit. I got some other slides. So I know this is kind of an abstract kind of concept.
Is that secondary treatment the water in the middle or the sludge on the bottom?
So actually, what's part of the process? You take some of that sludge at the bottom, and because it's so highly concentrated with microorganisms and bacteria, you actually recycle it through the process. So you have a higher concentration. You do more of that work. So you keep cycling over and over and over again, and it breaks down the wastes, and then eventually you have just a ton of bacteria and microorganisms, and you don't have the wastes any longer. Does that kind of make sense? So you get a higher and higher concentration to break down all the bad stuff in the water. Does anyone? Why don't you think back to high school chemistry? Anyone like chemistry when they were growing up? I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Oh, I've seen a lot of. Okay. Does anyone remember what this nasty-looking molecule is? I didn't expect that. I had to look it up myself. It's glucose. It's basically sugar. So we talk a lot about the stuff that you could see in there, like the poop and things like that. But you take a glass of water and you put sugar in that and you mix it up. What happens? It dissolves and you don't even know it's there, right? But you can taste it. You know that there's all sorts of dissolved pollutants that don't settle out, that they're already in the wastewater. That's why secondary treatment also works, is because you have those microorganisms to deal with them. So again, harkening back to high school chemistry, so C6H12O6, that's glucose, that's sugar, right? In our treatment plants, we have these big blowers a lot of times that introduce oxygen into the system, again, to promote that bacterial growth and things like that. So the bacteria end up metabolizing that sugar, just like we metabolize sugar ourselves, and produces CO2 and H2O. Does anyone remember what CO2 is?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide and H2O?
Water.
Okay, so we drink or eat sugar, right? We exhale carbon dioxide, and then we urinate, or through our bowels, we have portions of it as water. So, and we have bacteria in our gut that are doing some of that work and other things. So again, taking what happens in nature and cleaning up our sewage. That's what we're doing, but we're doing it in very engineered ways to make sure that it handles it properly. Yeah.
So I'm picturing big jugs of bacteria that they throw in there, or is this all just natural, whatever happens?
This is the beauty of it. It's already in the wastewater. So when people poop or they have whatever the case may be, they have bacteria that are already in there. And so
the secondary treatment is not something like we purposely made happen by dumping some kind of special.
Nope.
Okay.
We took what happens in nature and we controlled it, and we sped it up. And then what we do is, because we take some of the solids that settle at the bottom, which is like a high concentration bacteria, and we recycle it back in with the sewage that's coming in. So then you have another high concentration of more bacteria that are doing that work, and you have more bacteria that are doing that work, and more bacteria that are doing that work. And over the course of time, humans have kind of figured out that what's kind of the sweet spot of how much bacteria you need. Because if you have too much, then you can have problems where the bacteria don't have enough food. I mean, it sounds gross, but they're eating all this stuff, right? But if they don't have enough food, they start to die off, and then that causes its own problems. So, some of our treatment plant operators refer to themselves as zookeepers. They're keeping the bacteria happy and keeping them healthy, And then that's one of the key parts of the job. So we've been recycling in that sludge, the mixture of sewage and bacteria, and putting it through the treatment plants and doing all that type of work. And there's a lot of mixing that's involved in it. It's really agitated and things like that. But you can't take that and then just discharge it into the waterway. So then we have another clarifier. Showed you before, where you need to settle that out. And then you also make sure you skim off any of those oils and greases that may not made it through that last treatment step. And then you can see down here you have all those happy Pac-Men that are eating the various contaminants in the wastewater. And that's where you have some of the solid and you're recycling through. But then you have the cleaner water that's making its way onto the next step. So this is a video that shows the discharge on a clarifier at one of our treatment plants. So you can see here, this is what's referred to as a baffle. So this actually goes probably about 2 feet down into the water, and you can see it extends a couple inches above it. So you can see, I don't know if you can see, there's lots of little particles and things like that. That's the oils and greases that have floated to the top. And so you can see they're keeping them on the inside there, and then there's a scooping arm that's bringing them together. And you can see that you have the cleaner water that is coming on the end of there. And then that's going on to the next step. Sometimes that's the last step of the process, but other treatment plants may have a third step, which is called tertiary treatment. Basically, that's like filtration. I'm not going to get too much into this because I see we're already at 10 o'clock and I don't want to hold too long. Basically, it's kind of like a pool filter. So you have water that comes through, might have some small particles, debris, and things like that. It gets caught into the filter media. The clean water goes through, and then that goes on to, it gets then pumped out and goes on from there. And then sometimes then, if you get too much media in a pool filter, what do you have to do? You got to clean the filters. You have a backwash cycle where you basically go backwards and you take water and it goes up through there, and you got all that debris, and then we put that at the beginning of the treatment plant, and then hopefully it then settles out in the clarifiers, as to go from there.
So you said that not all of them have this tertiary treatment. Why wouldn't we all want that?
Well, because they are very expensive. And some clarifiers can be designed such that this is not a necessary step. So, for example, if you have a ton of land area, you can build a huge clarifier, then you can get a lot of settling going on, and you won't have this problem. But if you have a more compact area where you can't necessarily build a big enough tank, then this is just one example. There's a lot of other reasons why you may or may not need it. You may need that extra filter step just to make sure that you get all the solids out of there. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Sir,
Yeah.
my parents had a place on Cattaraugus Street, and our boat used to get the glue from the Cattaraugus Street from the glue factory.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. Their boat.
So they were discharging that into the. How long ago was that?
About 20 years ago.
That probably shouldn't happen. Just because, like, if it's anything that's causing like a water quality problem, they really need a permit to be able to do that. I'm not familiar with that. So we had all that bacteria and we used them to our advantage. We talked about how bacteria make people sick. We talked about typhoid fever and cholera and things like that. So the last step in the treatment process is disinfection. So we use those bacteria and we say, hey, thanks a lot, now we're going to kill you. So a lot of times we talk about chlorination, Buffalo Sewer Authority, that's oftentimes what's used. But also, there's actually UV disinfection. So if you ever heard of sunlight is the best disinfectant. that was meant for like corruption and things like that when it was said, I think, by Justice Brandeis back in the day. But what ends up happening is sunlight actually is an effective disinfectant. And what it does is it doesn't kill the bacteria. What it does is it actually alters its DNA. So when you get a sunburn that's altering your skin and your cells and stuff like that, well, what it does to the bacteria is certain wavelengths of UV light end up altering their DNA, makes it so they can't reproduce. And bacteria have very short lifespans. And if they can't reproduce, then the whole colony dies out.
How many of those do they have?
What's that?
How many of those treatments do they have?
Um,
Ultraviolet.
So for the county has a total of 6 treatment plants, and 2 of them have UV disinfection. The remainder of them use chlorination. Great question. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
trying to make sure I understand. So what we're doing is killing off the Pac-Man?
Yeah.
Okay.
And-
After they did
Yeah,
their job.
after they did their job, yeah.
And then, but new ones are always growing.
There are always because the flow never stops at a treatment plant. We always have sewage coming in.
Okay, so in summer, mostly I notice that the water really smells of bleach or chlorine. You know what I'm saying? Why? Why in the summer?
The
So
outdoor water or the water from the
Water coming in from the tap.
okay, so the water from the tap is again this different process because after disinfection, it goes into the lake, the river, the stream, or whatever the case may be. Depending on what, like the Erie County Water Authority, actually, I think Erie County Water Authority provides water out there too. They may be chlorinating because I think they use chlorination as well to make sure that the tap water is safe because you don't want bacteria growing in the water pipes. I don't know why they would use more during the summer. I honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. So then it's discharged as treated effluent. It's no longer wastewater, it's treated effluent. And we've removed those pollutants and we've recovered water. And we're taking that water and we're putting it back into the waterways. And this is the results. So this is what influent sewage looks like. And that's what it looks like coming out. So pretty marked difference, right? This is all the laboratory sampling that I've done. It's very small, but it shows you we are an extremely highly regulated industry. And I think that makes sense. We need to make sure that we're doing our job and make sure that we're not causing problems out there in the waterways, right?
We don't send out the lab samples anymore, do we? We have to ask for it.
Okay,
What's in our water?
so that again, that's Erie County Water Authority. So they used to send out a annual report or something like that. I believe it's on their website now. So I think if you go to ecwa.org, I'm not positive about
Yeah,
that.
Alma sells
Yeah.
theirs off.
So even though it looks clear, and again, you talked about the glucose and the sugar in there, so we know there's a lot of dissolved things. That's why we have our laboratory, because looks aren't everything, right? And we have we have 5 laboratory technicians and then 2 laboratory directors that are looking through all these samples and things like that, making sure that we have to report those to New York State DEC to show that we're in compliance.
Do you still check for COVID?
We do take samples and we actually send those to University of Buffalo, and the University of Buffalo then samples for COVID.
As well as TB, flu, everything like that?
So I don't know all of the diseases, but I know that they were looking at RSV, polio,
And what
maybe
location it
influenza.
came from? Who
So
would know?
the county actually has. There's a website I could direct you to. So afterwards, remind me because and the map of I gotta make sure I show you where it goes. So I can look that up on my phone when we're done. So maybe what happens with the solids, I'm gonna go through this really quickly because we're kind of getting up there yet. But basically, you have to dispose of the solids at the end. The ones that solid out, we recycle some of them, but eventually, if you can't recycle them forever, and you have to waste some of those. So basically, what we try to do is get all the water that we can out of it, because we're either going to be land applying, incinerating, composting, or landfilling that. Well, all of that ends up entailing some sort of cost that you will haul it away or move it to a different location. And the more water that you're moving, the more costly that is. So we really try to get all the water that we can out of those solids. You can actually digest these solids. You put them in what's referred to as anaerobic digester, and you heat it up between 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have it completely without oxygen, very similar to our digestive system. And then it breaks down those solids, and it produces methane, which is kind of like how humans produce gas. And then so then using that methane, burning it, and they can either heat their boilers or they can actually produce electricity.
Is it the thermal energy?
That's right. Just want to So we talked about what and who is a polluter at the beginning of the presentation. So now that you've heard about the history, of course, these folks are polluters. No one mentioned Cousin Eddie from National Lampoons, but you can't be putting that down the storm sewer, right? No one said sanitary sewer, which I was glad about. Even though it was kind of yucky, but we didn't say that the sewers are causing pollution. Yeah.
What happens to the other one,
The stormwater?
Yeah.
Stormwater is untreated, generally. So if you ever seen those decals on there that says, drains to the river or stream or whatever, that kind of reminds folks that, so don't be dumping your oil in the street, or, don't flick your cigarette butt into the street, because ultimately that's going to make its way into the waterway. Clean up after your dogs, because that will end up draining to there. All those type of things. People don't think about it, right? They're like, let's just throw it on the street. Someone will clean it up eventually. Or it goes down the storm sewer and goes right into our creeks,
So is there any filtering or anything to what goes?
No, not with the storm water.
And that's how it gets dumped into Lake Erie, because during the storm they can die.
So I want to make sure I give you the right answer. So most of the storm sewers go into the creeks, and then the creeks drain into Lake Erie and kind of make their way there. City of Buffalo has those combined sewers. So they have the sanitary and the storm going in the same pipe. But if it gets too big of a storm, they have an overflow. That'll make its way into there. But talking about the storm sewers, a lot of times folks are like, why are the beaches closed? And a lot of times they point to our treatment plant. But you have all that bacteria and stuff that's being run off on the land, and things like that make it into the creeks and then making their way down there. So it's a watershed issue. It's, so often in our society we want to say, there's one problem, you got to deal with it, and like it's black and white, and it's more nuanced than that, But a lot of the problem is actually the things that it's running off the land that cause those type of problems. When we're talking about polluters, someone said meat, and I thought that was an excellent answer, because oftentimes we don't think about that. And, we shouldn't be ashamed of that. I mean, brushing our teeth, washing our hands, washing our dishes, this is all a lot of what keeps us clean. But we have responsibilities as polluters. So what are some of our responsibilities? Well, first, toilets are not trash cans. So the only things that should go down there are pee, poop, and toilet paper. So I think you had mentioned about the flushable wipes, so I said that we'd get to that. This is what happens does anyone seen like those, they say they're flushable wipes? And what flushable means is they can make it down the toilet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to cause problems further downstream. So it can clog your lateral. So like the problem is if that clogs it, then you incur those plumbing costs. But what happens to us is a lot of times those wipes will come together and it'll clog one of our pumps. This is what we had when we had to remove debris from one of our pumps. And sometimes it's a nice sunny day like today, but other times it's 2 o'clock in the morning or Thanksgiving Day or whatever the case may be. So if you have those flushable wipes, please dispose of them in the trash. That
How about
doesn't-
medication?
medications, actually, do I have a slide on that? I may have a slide on that. I do have a slide on that. We'll get to that in a second, okay? Oh, that's right. This is actually kind of, this shows you the problem with flushable wipes. Okay, so toilet paper and a flushable wipe. Not cocktail hour, right? So, see, it went all the way through, clog your pipes. That's the problem with those flushables.
What's the best kind of toilet paper?
Scott,
Scott's?
Personal preference.
Single ply?
I mean, single ply is the safest with regard, but I know some people have concerns about single ply, about maybe dirtying their hands. So,
Wash 'em.
but that is the safest one, just because it does break down a little bit more. But most toilet papers, particularly if they're septic safe and things like that, should be fine, and they'll break down like the way that we showed there. Oils and greases. So a lot of folks are like, they finish up cooking bacon, right? Oh yeah, let's put it down the drain, a little hot water, and it'll be good to go. Problem is that grease congeals, and particularly if you have a flushable wipe in there, and then it goes on there, and so again, that causes a lot of problems. Plus, then we have to remove that at the treatment plant. Yeah, we're designed for it, but you don't really want to have a ton of that making its way down there. Because a lot of times, again, that'll congeal in the sewer because it hits that colder water in the sewage, and then it'll come on the side of pipes or it'll go into one of our pumping stations. So, for example, this is actually at the Pew pumping station, which is right at the Village of Pew DPW yard. We had to send one of our staff members down there to shovel out all the grease that had congealed in one pumping station. Terrible job.
The cleansers that we use, should we use more like vinegar and
So yeah, that works well.
instead of the high?
Yep, because think about that, it ultimately needs to be treated as well. And so the more natural, the better with regard to that. So folks ask, well, what should I do with my grease? Well, let it cool, get an old coffee can or something like that, put it down there, and then put it into the trash. That's the best thing. Or, I mean, I have friends that go camping and they save that cooking grease and then they utilize it to start fires. My one friend actually made a candle out of bacon grease. And it smelled really nice. So, but don't put it down the drain. I guess that's the most important part. Medications. So treatment plants are designed to remove certain things, the oils, the greases, the poop, all that type of stuff. There are literally tens of thousands of different medications, and the treatment plants are not designed to remove them. So the problem is if you flush your medications down the toilet, they make their way down the sewer system, and likely they're not going to be removed, whatever those components are. So they're actually starting to see that some, fish and aquatic life are having negative effects because of that. So one of the responsibilities of being a polluter is disposing your medications properly. There's drop boxes in many different places. I think there's one here. But a lot of police stations and things like that, they have drop boxes where you remove them. Even some pharmacies are starting out now to do that. So it's really important to not flush your medications down the road. But I get it because people are really concerned, particularly some of the ones that maybe have opioids in them, or painkillers after surgery and things like that. They want to get them out of their house because they don't want a family member to get their hands on them. So I recognize that people want to get rid of them. Just make sure they do it in a proper manner. The other thing is our responsibility for polluters is actually paying for it. Now, talk about the treatment plants, the pumping stations, the sewers. It's costly, and it's getting. We all know everything's gotten more costly over the last 4 or 5 years. Cable and internet, $200 a month. Cell phone, $100 a month. Electric is almost $1,000 a year. Gas is like $800 a year. Average sewer bill is $500 to $600 a year. You know, a lot of people would say that I couldn't live without my cell phone anymore. I couldn't live out without internet. Do we live without sewers?
Because more people have a phone than they have running water.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so just kind of bring that up that, you know, one of our responsibilities is, you know, you're going to have on your tax bill, if you are hooked up to a public sewer system, you know, you no one likes paying taxes. I don't like paying taxes, you know, I work for the county. But this is an essential service, and it's infrastructure that requires upgrading continually. It requires maintenance continually to make sure that all the things that, all the benefits are realized.
I think that guy who's doing that shoveling should be getting paid more than a football player.
Yeah, well, there you go. Although I do love the Bills, but I've advocated for pay raises for our folks because, you know, the Christmas blizzard a year and a half ago, you know, we had people stuck at the facilities for 3 days, you know, and then they wanted to, you know, they complained a little bit, but they knew it was just part of the job, and they knew that they were providing a key public function. So, ask the question at the beginning: what comes to mind when you think of sewers? You know, it was all yucky and gross and things like that. Oh, I hope maybe you think about protecting public health. So I talked about the 1850s when the cholera epidemic. This is a life expectancy from 1543 to 2021. See, in the 1860s, all of a sudden there's an inflection point when life expectancy starts to go up. That was because of sanitation, because of recognizing that we need to treat our wastes and we need to treat our drinking water to make sure that we don't get sick. There are some estimates that said, you know, life expectancy was around 40 years up until the late 1800s. There's some folks that have estimated that over 50% increase in life expectancy because of sanitation. So if you could take a pill that increase your life by 20 years, would you take it? You know, would you pay for it? You know, so that's what is done. Is sanitation is really, and you can see the rest of the world is kind of lagged behind because they haven't had that proper sanitation.
The United
things like
Kingdom's
that.
doing better than us.
Yeah, yep. You see a little dip that happened around COVID time. So when you think of sewers, hopefully you think about protecting the environment. You know, Buffalo River was lit on fire. Now you go down there around Canal Side, you see boats, tiki hunts, you got river works, you got the Bat Blue cans, you know, all sorts of recreation. And we kind of gravitate towards water, right? There's something magical about it. It creates money, it creates recreation, all those type of things. The fish, Lake Sturgeon were basically gone in Lake Erie. You're now starting to see sturgeon making a comeback, which are these huge, almost like dinosaur-like fish. They're pretty incredible. Now that we talked about Chris Hoover calling smallmouth bass fishery locally like one of the best in the world. Wasn't that way in 1960? And because of the advent of improved sewer systems is why that's the case. Hopefully supporting the economy. These are flow data from one of our pumping stations, one of the county's pumping stations, and services and industry locally. It happens to be a food manufacturer. In 2005 to 2023, their flows have gone from 300,000 gallons up to around 750,000 gallons per day. They basically doubled their production. So what does that mean? Well, they actually needed to almost double their workforce. They're a food manufacturer. They've taken a lot of dairy products and things like that. So you have all the farmers that are providing, you know, that. You have the truckers bringing in. You have the construction work to expand out their plant. Everything that goes along with that. This couldn't happen without sewers. In fact, we had a project to build a pumping station along Forest Main just to service their project. We worked with the Erie County Industrial Development Agency to do that. Not a lot of, again, think about the yuck and everything else that goes along with it, but there's a lot of real benefits that kind of come from it. And no one said when they thought of sewers of a greater Erie County. Back in the 1960s, post World War II. One of the things that the Board of Supervisors, this is actually before we had a county legislature, had said was a real problem was sewer systems were preventing Erie County from being better. It was talked about how it was uncoordinated, uneconomical, unsatisfactory. There was nuisance problems all over the place, and water pollution was prevalent. So a report was put together called Progressive Sewer Systems for a Greater Erie County. Because the Board of Supervisors has said that if we don't take care of this, we're going to have a lot of problems locally. So this, I went a little long, but I know there are a lot of questions before, but I really appreciate everyone's attention and things like that.